AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Dave Boerner. Dave is the Director of Data Strategy for Particle Health. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks, JP. How are you doing?
Very well, so very well indeed. I've been looking forward to this interview for some time now. So, let's get started. Dave, quick background of yourself, how you first got involved in technology, some of the roles you've held along the way, taking us up to your current position as the Director of Data Strategy for Particle Health.
I guess by training, I am a computer engineer, and straight out of college, I joined a leadership program with General Electric Health. And that was a rotational leadership program. That lasted 2 years. And from that point, I kind of realized that I wanted to be able to get my hands a little bit dirty in technology. So I joined a consulting company called Galen Healthcare, which was basically doing all scripts consulting. And that's where I started getting deep into healthcare integration. So learning HL7, V2 and V3 and those kinds of bits. And from there, I got recruited over to Orion Health, was what it was at the time. And I became a generalist, I'd say, around healthcare IT with the HIE solutions that they were building. And then eventually got pushed a little bit more towards the sales engineering side. And then after 5 or so years there, I kind of wanted to get my hands dirty and start moving into the startup world. So I also wanted to do something branched out of just integration. So I moved over to a startup over in the UK called Patients Know Best. Spent 4 years there and as the solution architect, which was a really great experience and learning a lot. And then after that, it was time to kind of come back to the States. From there, I also realized I'm really kind of a startup person, I think, and found a very early stage startup called Particle Health that we're with today, which, by the way, we just announced our Series A this week, which was an awesome experience. But from there, I got to kind of come back to the States and apply all my learning. And now I'm kind of heading data and strategy now.
Amazing. So you've spent the better part of a decade working in this space of data within healthcare, which is now led you to your current role at Particle. Could you, for anyone who's not familiar with who Particle Health are, could you give us a bit of an overview of the company, what the business model is, what you guys are working on, and then leading us into what your role as head of data strategy involves?
Yeah, sure. So what Particle does is we have taken advantage of some of the new legislation that's out there, which is breaking down information blocking. So you've got a number of different things. The ONC has pushed TEFCA, which is more legislation, which has basically said that these data silos need to get broken down and you should be sharing that data via APIs. So we've connected out to numerous networks across the country, and we've got access to about 250 to 300 million unique patient lives across the country. And we expose access to that via an API. And really what we're looking at is trying to empower different companies to help unlock the value that they can bring to the healthcare market, the innovation that they can bring. And we do that via access to an API. So it's secure and it's all built on trust. And by passing in the demographics of the patient that you're interested in, you're able to pull back data from across the country, irrespective of the EMR system that it came from. Everybody's playing Epic, Cerner, all those companies are contributing data, so we get access to all that.
So that's huge. So anyone who's listening who's working in healthcare data knows how big a step that is for data access. But for those who are not as familiar with healthcare data, could you talk about some of the challenges that we faced previously utilizing healthcare data and how siloed it was, and how big a step this is towards greater data access, and how Particle are leading the way in many respects in this.
Yeah, I've been living these issues for 15 years now, basically, and realizing how difficult it is to actually share the data, and not just to be able to push the data back and forth, but also for it to be interoperable in a way that systems can consume, and then it becomes integrated in a way that the end user, the clinician, for example, is able to interact with it without having to disrupt their flow in a way that is so disruptive that they just won't even utilize it. When I started, 15 years ago or so, it was all about point-to-point integration. So you literally had to go to every single hospital or healthcare organization that you wanted to share data with, and you had to build a custom integration. It was all really in HL7v2, which is like event-based messaging and sharing that around. And that is a really, really tough way to achieve scale. When I came back and started talking to Troy and the team at Particle, I was blown away by what had changed with the legislation, because I didn't realize that we would ever get there, because when I was still in the States, we had moved towards the HIE model. So it was more like states were starting to exchange information in localities, mostly around the states or groups of states. And it was just a slow slog to get to that point. And then I talked to Troy, and all of a sudden, wow, we got access to these networks where all of the EMR vendors have decided to start sharing the data, because they see that this legislation is coming down the pike, and they might as well get ahead of it. And now, by becoming an accredited member, you're able to get access to all that data, and you get a one-to-many type of connection. And then the other way that folks have been trying to get that data is what we call portal scraping. So if a patient wants access to their data, or you want to get access to data through the patient, they need to go and log into their portals. Well, I mean, that's just not a very scalable way either, because the patient needs to remember which portals that they have logins to, where they've actually been, has that data even been shared around properly. There's just a lot of barrier to that actually reaching scale. So what we do is just you work with us, and we give you access. It's a one-to-many connection to everything, and we can pull that data back for you through a simplified API.
Yeah, it's huge step forward. Could you give some examples for again, people who are not as familiar with healthcare data and health tech as a general field? Can you talk about some examples of the impact that this could have, whether it's hospital care, treatment, clinical studies, but just overall impact to the industry? Some examples of what we can see changing for the better.
Yeah, definitely. Right now, there's a lot of focus on telehealth, right, with COVID-19, and folks don't want to have to be going into the hospital to be triaged, for example. So, and by the way, we are giving out access to the API completely for free for anything related to COVID-19. But the example that we're seeing, as we're talking with lots of telehealth providers right now, is the ability to be able to kind of become more efficient with the triaging process. So typically, and I actually just had a telehealth visit right now, which was my first one after 15 years in the space. So I was pretty excited about that. But at the end of the telehealth visit, she's like, well, can I end up, asking me some questions to get more information? And they asked if I had, any medications. And I said, well, maybe you should talk to my company, because if you just access our API, you can pull all of that information ahead of time. You have it all visible to you right there. And that helps obviously a lot of things, right? You can more effectively triage the patient to see if they have at-risk factors and actually need to go get a test immediately, or should be, sent to the ER. You can look for contraindications and medications you're taking, those kinds of things. And we're not relying on the process of the patient remembering everything, or the patient, even being honest, to be honest with you, and being able to, from their best of their memory, recollect and tell you what it is. There's just too many opportunities to miss things. So if at the beginning of a telehealth consult, the provider is able to just go ahead and pull all that data, they can have just such a more efficient and effective consult. It's just the way things should work. And this holds true beyond telehealth. There's many other examples of what we're looking at.
Yeah, I think at a high level, opening up data access on this scale will improve all care at all levels, from preventative to treatment. So it's a huge step. I'd like to touch more on the data science aspect, because I think it's important to help people understand what goes on behind the scenes in order to take these vast sums of data and put it into a form that can be understood, shared, and then used for further predictions. So could you sort of give us some insight into what that looks like, what the various use cases for data science have been, and what you've had to implement, and how that's going to change over time?
The first thing I mentioned is that we made a decision early on that we are not going to store PHI. So there's no identifiable healthcare information that we're storing at all. And that really kind of alleviates a lot of the stress of having to worry about security compliance and those kinds of things. But that doesn't mean that there's not data that we do store that is really valuable to the customer. So the main thing that we take away when we try to build these types of dashboards is it can't just be pretty graphs, right? It needs to be something that needs to be an insight that is novel, and it's also actionable. So if you are looking at the success rate of the queries that you're making, for example, and we find that you're below 50%, well, we need to really be able to dig into that and understand what's driving that. And then we're able to figure out things like, oh, you have forgotten to send the patient's address in most of these queries. And that really, we were able to tease out that ended up driving like a 30% greater increase in the success rate. So those kinds of things are really, really important to be able to tease out. Right now, a lot of that insight is about also seeing the depth of the data that comes back, right? So people are really interested in knowing what vendors the data is coming from, right? So you hear a lot about maybe Epic isn't interoperable, but we're able to very clearly show that you're pulling back, CCDs and different types of documents directly from Epic, so that you're absolutely getting that kind of breadth that you're looking for. And then it's also interesting to be able to see kind of the stretch of the geographical stretch of where we're actually able to hit. So we've built out a record locator service where we use heuristics based upon the patient address and different registries that know where the patients have been, to be able to kind of intelligently look at the most likely places that are going to have data for the patient. We're moving more towards a customer portal type experience. So when we first started, we were really just focused on making this the simplest API to use, and we definitely are still laser focused on that. And I'd say across the industry, it's the easiest way to pull data. You just pass demographics, and then you pull the data back. And it's a two-step process, very flat and simple. But I think the more that we've learned is that there does need to be kind of a GUI element where people interact with and just kind of are able to get up to speed fast. So we're rapidly iterating on building out that kind of process. Right now, we've got a developer portal to do that, but we're going to integrate that more into, bringing the customer onboarding experience, making that smoother and more attractive, as well as the operational ongoing experience where that BI needs to be fed into it. Because if you think about it, your greatest advocate is going to be that BI. The business analyst at the customer level is going to be looking at that data, and they are able to make the business case for why this is working, right? I can tell you all the ROI statistics that I can pull out from anywhere, but until you actually see the data and you can tie that back to, actual tangible numbers that are, increasing business or lowering costs or improving healthcare, you can't really convince the customer that what you're doing is the right thing and worthy of the time that you're spending.
I think that was a great finish to the point, Dave. You made three very clear points there, which is improving outcomes, reducing costs, improving service. So that's obviously the message, and it's really powerful. You've worked in this space for some time now, and there's been unique challenges right the way throughout. What are you most excited about now going forward, being in an organization like Particle, where you've been there from, as you said, employee 4, just now got Series A? What are you looking forward to the most as the business grows?
To be honest, we've got so many different data products in the pipeline that we're going to be able to release. And the more data networks that we get integrated to, the more types of solutions that we can offer, which I'm really excited about. I'm really focused on making sure that we can get as many people access to this, in a secure and trusted manner. I spent 4 years at a personal healthcare record startup, so I have a personal interest in getting patients access to their own medical data, because I think that unlocks tons of other opportunities. But the kind of thing that actually excites all of us at Particle the most is not necessarily what we're doing, but what all of our customers are doing, because we are that data pipeline to unlock the innovation that they're doing. And these people are doing some really cool stuff. They just need the access to the data to kind of empower it and kind of help it take off. So it's really interesting to be able to see your impact in a tangible way very quickly, just by giving access to reusable data that people can integrate with quickly.
Absolutely, yeah. Focusing then on the build, and as you said, there's many projects in the pipeline. So as somebody who's leading the data function, you're inevitably going to have to be building out a team to service the scale of these projects. So the space you operate in is quite unique, requires some specialized knowledge, because the data sets you're dealing with are inherently different to anything else that's out there in the marketplace. So as you look to build a team, what are the key things going to be as you scale with both skill set and background of individuals?
There's quite a few roles that we need to hire for. We started off primarily focused on the back end, right? And we want engineers that are able to code in modern programming languages. We focus a lot on Go, but Python, Java, a lot of those are really important. We also need infrastructure folks. So I think at this point, everybody should be focusing on some kind of cloud infrastructure. We're a Google shop, so we use GCP, and we're always looking for kind of full stack people there. In terms of the data skill set, if people want to get in deep into healthcare data, focusing on FHIR is the fast healthcare interoperable resource paradigm is really the way forward. So if there's someone out there who is able to combine that, not only the knowledge of being able to code and develop those things, but also understanding the paradigms of how healthcare data is shared from a transmission view, via secure REST transmission, to the actual data standards of JSON and XML, and being able to break it down into FHIR resources and bundles, as well as, to another extent, the consolidated CDA documents and that kind of architecture. That is really valuable skills that are going to be highly sought after, not just for us, but really any company that needs to be able to kind of dissect the data, parse it, break it down, store it, and kind of use it in an intelligent way.
Finishing on then, I want to use this as an opportunity to help people who are listening and are intrigued about this. The web API, first and foremost, the free access for COVID. We'll be sure to share the link to that when we post this podcast. But what I want to have you speak on now is, you've touched on what you're working on in the here and now, but as you cast the net wider and wider, and we start to build up more familiarity with using this data, what are the future use cases that you see that you guys are currently working on, and how a service like Particle Health can give organizations access to problems to solve that we're not currently working on?
You can even go to our website, and we've got an entire page dedicated to use cases. We're focused mostly on treatment, because that's what everybody is responding to right now. So anytime that you pull the data, anytime that there's a clinician that's interacting with the data to help with treatment, pretty much we're getting responses from everybody. And I think there's an endless amount of use cases there. But we've got things like payment and utilization. So to be able to be reimbursed for services, health plans to kind of understand the premiums that they can offer, fulfill their coverage responsibilities. That's definitely coming out there as well. Operations, so things like admin, finance, legal. All of that is going to be there to help kind of support the core functions of the businesses that you're running. There's things like population health levels. So eventually being able to pull probably anonymized data sets at population scales and be able to kind of tease out insights from there. I already talked about individual access, which is near and dear to my heart, where patients will be able to get access to their own data and start being able to use it as they like, and not only be able to access it, but also interact with it and contribute to it. You'll find that when citizens actually see their own data, they're able to make a lot of corrections. So I think I really do see the, sky's the limit here about what we can do with the different types of use cases that are out there. It's just getting it so that the networks have gotten to the point where they're responding to data and they trust that the people that are requesting it are authorizing the right people to look at it.
And each of those possible use cases are industries waiting to be built as people become more familiar with the data. Excellent. Look, final point, Dave. There's going to be people who are listening to this now who are genuinely fascinated and want to understand how to position themselves as industry experts. You're someone who's spent the last, 10 to 15 years focused on data within one particular industry and have built up a level of expertise. Could you talk about your experience focusing on one industry? What have been the benefits, what have been some of the challenges, and then speaking to maybe people coming out of academia who have a genuine interest in one industry, but maybe apprehensive about doubling down on one specific area versus being more open and trying different industries. Could you just speak to your experience with that and what advice or guidance you could offer to somebody else who is considering that as a possible path?
It's funny, I'm not sure what the right answer to that question is. I think there's a quote from Steve Jobs that the path only makes sense when you look back at the steps that you took, or something along those lines. And when I started out, I didn't have an interest in healthcare. I, with that GE leadership program that I started with, I wanted to go to NBC because I wanted to live in New York, but they selected me for healthcare, and I went to Milwaukee. And for a Florida boy, that was a bit tough. But looking back on it, it was absolutely the right decision because NBC ended up, being moved, and entertainment and those things aren't really recession and certainly not pandemic proof like healthcare is. So it's a pretty safe bet that healthcare is not going to be super affected by what's going on today. I wouldn't disagree with the concept of kind of casting a wide net and dabbling a little bit at the beginning and kind of at least pursuing something that you are passionate about. And I kind of did that to an extent when I started with that leadership program, and realizing, I didn't necessarily want to be a developer, even though I was trained that way. And I decided to try and see if, management was the right direction for me. But then I realized that I wasn't comfortable with just being a manager. It was something that I don't feel comfortable leading a team unless I have gotten my hands dirty and understand things at a very, granular level and know what I'm actually talking about. So I would definitely suggest kind of exploring different opportunities, but eventually just trying to commit to something. And I think you end up finding that you maybe don't necessarily have the passion at the beginning, but as you get deeper and deeper into it, it's just kind of part of human nature to become more interested in it.
Yeah, I think, look, subject matter expertise can go a long way, and it compounds over time. So if you find something that you like, that you're interested in, and you're good at, see how far that takes you, because generally speaking, if you're enjoying what you're doing, it will take you a lot further than not. Dave, final point then before we wrap up, speaking to the audience of people who are interested in this space and are going to follow and watch Parallel Health, what's the company going to look like in 2 years, 24 months from now as you continue to work on things and grow? How is it going to evolve?
We use an analogy a lot internally that we are aiming to be the Plaid for healthcare. So the way that Plaid worked out was they ended up democratizing access to banking data. And they didn't necessarily build the consumer facing apps that you end up using day to day, but I guarantee you've probably played with, Venmo or Robinhood or Mint and those kinds of things, and they get access to that data through Plaid. So we are interested in kind of being that data access layer and eventually being able to expose different types of data sets that make sense to help, basically rocket power your use cases that you're trying to bring to the market. So, I mean, where we're going in 2 years, I think, like I said before, the sky's the limit. There's a lot of different use cases that we're going to be out there. So we're going to need people that have deep knowledge about different types of healthcare data standards, but not just healthcare as well. You also got things like claims, so like claims processing, and we're going to keep expanding that type of team and that kind of knowledge base. And our sales team is probably going to go, 3-4x by that point as well. Account managers, being able to keep people happy and understand the value in the data that they're pulling, that kind of thing. And site reliability engineers to make sure that the platform is scalable, which is obviously the goal. I think in 2 to 3 years, we're going to be the leader in the market in terms of being able to help get access to data and kind of move it around and get it at the right place at the right time.
It's huge. It's incredibly exciting. Well, look, Dave, I'm really fortunate to be speaking to you at this time. I know it's been a busy week for you with the Series A announcement. So congratulations to you and the team again. We're very much looking forward to seeing what you guys can accomplish in this space. Clearly a unique offering, and you're having an impact already. So we look forward to seeing you guys grow. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, JB.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.